11 बजे, कभी 10 बजे, कभी शाम के 5 बजे, अलग अलग मुहूर्त के हिसाब से आप सभी के सामने अपने ही मन मानी के हिसाब से आते हैं और कभी किसी और को भेज दिया करते हैं। कभी ना आने के लिए माफी और बार बार आने के लिए फिर से माफी, लेकिन ये हमारा साथ जो है जारी रहेगा यूट्यूब पे, जूम के जरिए। टीडीसी की तरफ से, इंडियन डिजाइन लीग की तरफ से अमृतांश तिवारी का नमस्कार आप स्वीकार करें। और आज के सेशंस को डायरेक्ट आगे बढ़ाने से पहले I would like to tell you guys something about Indian Design League, our online portal for all creative individuals out there, fashion designer, interior designer, stylist, and the one who wants to be their own boss, open a brand or something. Great initiative by Indian Design League to provide all those कल्चरल प्रूफ्स देयर कि आप वहां पे ऑनलाइन भी कुछ कर सकते हैं। एंड टुडे उसी कड़ी में एक नई शुरुआत हमारी फिर से होगी। एंड वी हैव मिस्टर अतीब अलोंग विथ अस, जो कोसों दूर से हमारे साथ जुड़े हुए हैं, मुस्कुराता चेहरा। मैं भी 15 मिनट पहले मिला हूं, लेकिन अभी भी अच्छा लग रहा है क्योंकि as you mentioned the last line, not nervous at all, so that helps me a lot. Mr. Atif, जो मुझे आपके बारे में पता चला, it has been a wonderful short introduction कि you have been completely dedicated to understand and establish a circular practice in textile consumption. ज्यादा sustainability हो गया, recycling हो गया, इसके ऊपर रहा है आपका अभी तक का सफर। You graduated from London College of Fashion and आपने मेरे लैंग्वेज में री और आपके लैंग्वेज में री, ये जो ब्रांड है जिसकी हमने प्रोनाउंसिएशन थोड़े पहले सीखी है, उसके भी आप को-फाउंडर रहे हैं, जो कि एक आपके वर्ड्स में जो आपने बताया कि इट्स अ ब्रांड ऑफ कॉन्शियस क्लोथिंग जो लिखा हुआ है यहाँ पे। ओके, सो वी आर एक्साइटेड टू हैव यू ऑन द बोर्ड। वी आर एक्साइटेड कि हमारे काफी पब्लिक हमारे साथ ऑनलाइन जुड़ने वाली है, इनफैक्ट जुड़ भी चुकी है। एंड दे आर एक्साइटेड टू सी यू, दे आर एक्साइटेड टू हियर फ्रॉम यू एंड लर्न फ्रॉम यू व्हाटएवर यू हैव फॉर दिस शॉर्ट ड्यूरेशन। ओवर टू यू मिस्टर अतीब। You are mute, sir. Sirji, you are mute. Atif sir, you are mute.
Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you, Amita. Thank you so much. It's a really sweet introduction, and I'm really happy to be here to do this. Sustainability is something that पिछले कुछ सालों से I've been very closely trying to understand it as a concept, as a practice, as a business, and as a way of life. So I'm really happy and I feel honored to share that here with you guys. I'll just take this on in the form of a storytelling. I think sustainability is not something that can be taught. It is something that we must share with each other. And that's really what I'm here to do. I'm just going to tell you my understanding of the story so that it helps everybody who's part of this conversation today. So I'll start really simply. I took up my favorite story to draw parallels for understanding really what this big word means. It's a word that's become really popular in everything, wherever we go, whether it's something new that we are acquiring or it is, I don't know, anything that we're consuming online as content. This word is really, really popular right now. And but there's very little understanding of what it truly means. So I wanted to demystify that a little bit. One of my favorite ways to do things is to actually kind of break it down in the most simplest story format as possible. So I'm using Lion King. I don't know, I'm hoping everyone has heard of Lion King at least as a story. It's a childhood favorite of mine. Sorry. And if you recognize Pride Rock, that's really where I'd like to start this. So once upon a time, before everything began, we were really in harmony with nature. You know, there was no conflict. Everything was working with the cycles of this earth as it was determined and designed to be. It was a land of simple trade. Even in terms of trade, what I mean to say is that we're in a constant state of exchange with nature. You know, and in that you are nature as well. So I draw parallels of what Mufasa and Simba, as you can see, the two lions share. It's the idea of actually one giving to the other so that, you know, you keep being responsible towards the future that comes in. But, however, The twist in the tale is when you have someone who brings in more than what is required and therefore sets things off balance. I draw Scar, who's the villain of this story, as fast fashion that came into the cycle of things and kind of distracted the main character, which is Simba, and creates a sense of consumerism, which is turning everybody into the idea of a consumer, that if you don't consume, you don't get to survive. But that's a fallacy, because that's actually just a technique created to distract every individual from what they should be doing to be connected with nature. And while the consumer thinks that they are in the land of infinite possibilities, singing Hakuna Matata, which means there is no worries, what it does is it gives an opportunity to a few to actually offset this balance that we are trying to stay in with nature. And it leads us to a place where our earth is actually slowly dying. Sorry to be morbid, but I mean, this is not a truth that none of us know, but it is a harsh reality that we are facing because we've just kind of turned our back in some senses. But as happens in Lion King, Simba at some point realizes that he needs to get back to where he's from, because that's really where his roots are, his identity is, and that's where his nature is at. So, which brings him to a state of understanding that responsibility, which he was shying away from, singing Hakuna Matata, is actually the most important thing for sustainability, not just for himself, but for everyone involved, for his entire pride, for the entire ecosystem that surrounds that pride. So this is a bit of a nutshell of what I'm going to actually talk about today, just using a fun way to kind of break down a bigger concept, which is sustainability. What I'd also like to start with at this point is how we got here. Why is sustainability so important? More than even what it is, why is it that it's so trendy right now? Why is it that it's so present? Why is it that there's so much focus on it right now as opposed to maybe even 10 years ago? I think I find it easier to answer questions or to find my role in the state of things if I'm able to understand the why. So I'll start with that. I feel the biggest sort of intervention that happened was the human instinct and the human need for exchange that kind of, meddles with nature. So while we're in the natural order of things and we're enjoying things as they are, we're the only species that feels this inherent need to exchange. Trees give fruits, they take water from their roots. They don't feel like they're solving some higher purpose. We are the only species that thinks that we have to solve some higher purpose from everything we give or take. And that exchange is what led us to become enterprising, where we felt that we needed to validate this exchange over everything, in fact, and which gave rise to a movement called industrialization, which actually took all human effort and started expediting it. How can, if I do this much with my own human hands, how can I multiply that many times with the intervention of a machine? And at some point, it's great because it fascinates your curiosity. But on some level, it's dangerous because why do you want to do away with human skill? The answer to that was brought about because of three very important factors. It allowed us to not only replace human effort, which meant that, aapko kam kaam karna padega for larger output. but it also gave us a sense of confidence as a species, a confidence over nature. We felt like we could trump uncertainty by actually creating from a place of control, that I control this factory, I put it together in a factory format, and therefore I'm able to assert control over resources. So I plow this soil, so I'm in charge, and I control it. I spin this cotton, so I'm in charge. I control it. And why we allowed that to happen was also because we were eager for a shift of power. We were running as kingdoms, and it was important to shift that power into a more democratized manner, and governments wanted that as well. They were eager to not have this monarchy of sorts leading the way for the future, and it gave everybody the sense of empowerment to think that because they did, they would be better. So, but it was sadly like a mistaken thing, because it also meant that only people who had capital had the power. So it's not just every factory worker who felt empowerment, even though they contributed to the industrialization. They actually were under the control of the person who held control to the factory. And lo and behold, we have the idea of capitalism. I know a lot of you have heard this term, and a lot of you hate the term as well. But it is a principle and a concept that governs a lot of our current commerce and business. The idea of capital basically is money that creates more money from money. And capitalism is a system that allows you to do that by hiring many people to create that kind of effort, and therefore gaining revenue from the effort of, or the human effort. And I mean, when I break it down like this, I feel like, is that the contract we've already signed and we're totally okay with it? But it's been on for so long. Like Industrial Revolution happened in around 1760. It's been on for that many centuries that it feels okay. It feels okay for us to actually be governed by this format of working, where a singular person and their gains is, or a singular entity, not even person, an entity and their gains is enough to propel an entire society to keep working in a certain direction. And the reason that that stays ongoing or continuous is because of the idea of, consumerism. If you consume, the entity is fed. So as long as you buy, I can make. And I will make in hundreds and thousands and millions and convince you that you need to buy. With population growing and with agricultural revolution, where we had more than enough for everyone to eat and survive, and because now we had time on our hands because we were in factory systems, business or trade people took it upon themselves to convince societies that they needed to buy more. And they used very interesting marketing ideas to be able to convince you that you needed new things. It was not only the culture of new, but also that your happiness depended on what you consume. Many of us actually, I mean, we don't even realize, but that's the way we operate today. It's your birthday, you feel like you deserve a new, outfit. It is, I don't know, some important event in your life, and you feel like you ought to be dressed up in a certain manner because time dictates so and demands so. We feel like our worth is dependent on what we consume. It's been made okay to our minds by making us feel like this is the democratization of desire. What does that mean? That means that you, me, everyone can desire the same thing. It doesn't sit in the hands of a few. And therefore, if you think there is a certain kind of outfit that you must put on because you've seen a certain celebrity wear it, don't worry, we've got it for you in a budget that you can afford. But you must buy it because your happiness depends on it. Because you must look like anybody you want to look like. In that, what is the funny part is that the anybody you want to look like is anything but yourself. So that's really what consumerism is even based on. Why we need to rush to a fast fashion store to cash in on their sales, or to be the first one to bag a trend, or to post about it. These are all aspects around consumerism that are so well ingrained into our working today that they're second nature to us. We don't even question them. But it is exactly this that is causing the dissonance. It's causing the almost that we're looking at everything as resource. So you start to value yourself only by the monetary value of things in society, by the measure of, and it's very cleverly masked as brand. But that's really the format in which we're operating, businesses are operating today. And it's something that began way before any of us came to being. What consumerism has also given rise to and has opened the gates for is the age of individualism, or the idea of individuality, where, till how long am I going to sell all of you the same toothpaste or the same t-shirt? At some point, somebody's going to get up and say, but I want to wear a different color. So over the last century or so, we have given more and more room to individuality to thrive, where initially it starts off by making space for the artists and the free thinkers to actually have a say. But it moves into a space where we're calling it the freedom, the individual freedom that everyone should have. But what we're also doing is we're pitting one person against the other. It's a survival of the fittest that it's actually done, where it's okay. If you want to wear a pink t-shirt, you must be able to wear it. Come to our store, we'll make it for you. You can have it. And you want to wear a blue t-shirt, you must be able to wear it. What it's done is that it's pitted the blue against the pink. And we feel, and with the digitization of things, we feel like every desire of ours is valid, and as it should be, but it sits in such a small bubble that it refuses to connect with an ecosystem that's bigger than its own bubble. So I think I'm sitting here and I want to be able to acquire X, and I feel I'm valid in acquiring it just because I have love for nature and I'm vegan and I'm doing right by everything else. But if I just stretch my entire need for something across a larger circumference, across a larger spectrum, then I realize that I'm not just in an isolation. Is my need that valid? Without putting unnecessary guilt, but actually putting some serious curiosity in it. Like a lot of us have stopped wanting straws at fast food or any kind of food establishments. It has come because there's a larger awareness that's coming that maybe plastic straws are bad because there's a turtle out there that has swallowed it and therefore, its life is at risk. But it's those awarenesses that we need to get across our entire individuality so that we don't question ourselves, but we question the consequences of what we do. Because what we are doing is we are competing against one another. And where that's leaving us is we're feeling insulated. Like, it's cool. I watch so-and-so show, you watch so-and-so show. It's absolutely fine. But in some manner, because there are larger entities working behind us, they're also pitting our preferences against somebody else's. So you gain mileage in a social or a digital context if you are following something that's popular, or that belongs to a community that's larger than X. You feel like you belong to something more, which is also why we're seeking community. You feel so insulated in your choices sometimes that you want to reach out and find other people that are feeling exactly this, or feel this way about this, or follow so-and-so formats of trend or style. And you want to relate to them and they want to relate to you, because maybe we're not relating to everyone at home, or we're not relating to our peer group. So while there is so much excitement and abundance in the fact that the world is shrinking because I can connect with someone sitting miles and miles away and we realize how similar we are, we're also feeling more and more insular in the fact that only that person gets me and nobody else around me gets me, because they're so starkly different from me. And that kind of divide is what is the scary bit. And that's what's creating that divide between us and the natural order of things as well. Because while there's infinite choice, like, it's exciting. I can be anything I want to today. I don't have to wear a white t-shirt. I can wear a blue, I can wear pink, I can wear yellow, I can wear neon, I can wear metallic, I can wear anything. That infinite choice is also scary sometimes, because it means that every decision needs to be worked out from a place of genuinity and a place of real principle. But that original principle is lost if we're not connected to the natural order, which most of us are not. I'm coming from probably a space of rebellion. I don't want to wear yellow because my everyone around me wears yellow, or my elder brother used to wear yellow and I want to be different from him. That's not principle enough, if you get what I mean. I'm just bringing awareness to our choices. Bear with me. What it's also done is it's opened room out, because of this long drawn conversation where we're actually finally coming around to a point where we're realizing that all of these options are kind of limiting. I'm trying everything, but it still leaves me slightly sort of dissatisfied at the end of the day. Like, yes, I bought that jacket that I really wanted to, but in some format or the other, I'm looking for a more holistic happiness. And that I think a lot of us discovered during the pandemic, because we were really put to the test. We were really put to kind of understanding where we belong, besides our physical sort of surroundings, where we belong as a species. And a lot of us took to nature to understand our own validity. A lot of us became plant parents, because you had the time, you were living at home, and you felt like, I can connect with this, I can do this. And I think it's brought in a sense of real satisfaction to most people to actually care for plants. It's not just a fad or a trend. It's actually, I see it as a lot of us finding our way back to the source, to the core, to the natural order, and actually kind of understanding that our self comes not just from the few possessions that we kind of surround ourselves with, but it's actually the environment. The self is not different from the environment. And it brings a larger question into our realms, is who are we doing this for? And in that we start questioning the bigger aspect, which is future. And I'd like to think that your generation, and talking to all the young people here, which is the Gen Z, has actually led that change, because you're a generation that has come in and is asking this question, because you're a generation that is actually witnessing what's happening. This entire story that I've sort of in a very quick manner told you about, the length of human existence of sorts, is now sitting on the shoulders of every individual who is a Gen Z, and is actually questioning, okay, so where from here? And because that generation is asking that question, it's making the rest of the world actually sit up and take notice of, okay, what are we doing and who are we doing this for? And that gives rise to a lot of very important questions. Gen Z is a generation that is actually facing existential anxiety, because they're a generation that, you are a generation that are faced with a future that you don't know how long you have to take for granted. Does this planet actually have the ability to be able to sustain my life till I'm around in my future? Are the seas going to rise so high that I will not have a home tomorrow? Am I consuming something that will probably not biodegrade within my lifespan, and therefore that is a problem, because I am sitting with non-biodegraded waste from generations before me? And that kind of awareness has created not only an anxiety, but also a responsibility. I hope you all recognize the individual in this picture here. That's Greta Thunberg, somebody who's become an icon for sustainability and change as it is right now. She holds that sign, which is something that she's made so popular across the world, which is she actually, like, she stopped going to school for climate change. Basically, she said that I don't need this education that's not going to help me for a life that I won't get to live if the climate change doesn't happen. And I mean, it's small things like that, small individuals standing up and actually owning that space, that have got all of us asking this larger question that, okay, what do I have to do to be part of a sustainable movement for our future? And the answer is really simple. Every job needs to be a sustainability job. Every action needs to be a climate action, where nothing you do is it's not separate from anything else. If you are consuming something, you are contributing to the future of this planet. And when you do it with that sort of consciousness, initially can feel a bit heavy, like, come on, it's just one t-shirt. But if you actually make it something that you really, really genuinely internalize, it becomes a lot more than just a purchase you're making. It becomes part of your principle, part of your identity. And then it doesn't feel so daunting. It doesn't feel like so much of anxiety or pressure. And this brings me to what we're really, really trying to talk about here, which is the idea of sustainability. This big, huge word that surrounds our lives today and the way we consume, the way we do things. So now I can now I've set the stage. I've given you context for, like, क्यों sustainability? इतनी ज़रूरत क्या है सोचने की? And we tend to do this kind of thing where we try and isolate ourselves, which is why I did this whole length and breadth of things that we've done as a race in general, so that we don't feel like, I've heard lots of people say, "Arey, we're in India. We all hum bhai behan ke kapde pehen lete hain, and we're not that bad. We're not as bad as America, so we don't have to worry about sustainability." I've heard, people across the world say, "Oh, but I'm vegan. I'm doing my bit, and therefore I'm doing enough, and I don't have to worry about sustainability. I can still buy fast fashion because I don't eat meat." it's things like that. So it's not one against the other. Everything is tied in. Everything matters, and that's why it's important for all of us to actually sit up and take notice of what it means to be sustainable. If I were to break it down in terms of industry standards, the UN has set 17 goals for all businesses and all practices for all of us as a human race, so that we may become sustainable by 2030. It sounds like a bit of a tall order, but I want to stay optimistic. And I think it's important that we actually give us this tall order, because we're sitting in a time where if we don't do that, we're looking at change to the climate, which might be irreversible. So that's actually also why sustainability is super important right now, because we need to act on it today. And these are about 17 really interesting aspects of sustainable development that the UN has outlined, that are important to everybody who's running anything today. So if I run a business, it's important that I'm ticking, hopefully, all the boxes in. And if I am, then I'm contributing towards the sustainable development of us as a race, of us as a commerce, of us as a community. So that's one. You can read all of these up there. They're easily available online, but do give them a thought. They're also expanded very beautifully on the UN website. So give that a look. The part that I'd like to focus today's attention on is our entire textile consumption, where yes, there's sustainability in so many aspects of our life that we need to focus on, but it's the clothes that we put on our backs that are also a huge part of that entire conversation. And it's textiles which make up these clothes. That is an industry that has been around for so long, and is losing meaning because it's losing its importance in trend and color and what have you. Textiles are actually the way that we tell our stories as a humankind. And being able to give value to textiles is what allows us to give value to our own cultural understanding of things. So which is why recycling of textiles is super important, I feel, because otherwise we're following this kind of linear pattern. Kharido, use karo, phenko, and then naya kharido, use karo. It's like you just keep going on and on one line. But when you think about actually bringing things back to where they started, जो आपने खरीदा है, use करो और इतना use हो ताकि उसकी lifespan is extended to its maximum. And then अगर उसको फेंकना भी है, and if you have to discard it, or then it should never be waste. Can it go back and still become exactly like everything else in nature? And textiles were actually designed to be that. Your biggest example is your cotton sari. It's like, speak to your mothers, your grandmothers. It's a garment in the, I would say, in the Indian household, primarily, that has been the most sustainable garment over time. It is a garment that starts very simply as a drape on the body and is passed on, is shared and passed on, because a sari is something that is sizeless, so it can be shared by many, and it is passed on because it has value. So it is passed from one generation to another, from between friends. It's so easy to kind of just let that sari go till it reaches a point where, in fact, cotton saris after a certain wear were preserved, because then they had become soft enough that they could be used for baby clothes. So in Indian sort of traditions and culture, young born infants, like newborns, are never put into naya kapda. they're always wrapped in an older fabric that has sort of seen enough wear and has therefore softened, so has no intervention from the outside. It's completely pure, soft, and therefore protects like an infant in the most wholesome manner. So old saris were actually saved to make coverings and clothes for babies. And after that, after those uses, or if they weren't used for babies, they were used to be patched together and quilted to make a quilt. Everyone's probably seen a quilt made out of saris in their ancestral homes or something. Or if you went back into history and looked up, the idea of quilting saris together exists in every part of our country. Cotton saris primarily. And once they're done being quilts, once they've been used for, again, generations as quilts, they were probably disintegrating and have been used as rags or foot mats. And finally, when they have no more like yarn left in them, they can easily be put into the soil and they will be absorbed back in. That is like true circular. Like there's zero wastage whatsoever. At every stage that cotton fiber has gone and been used to its maximum and gone back to its source, which is the soil. That's how all of nature operates. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we being able to actually practice that? Because we've taken our entire textile conversation into a place where we're so focused on how to look special that we've forgotten how to feel special in our textiles, and which is why it's so important to bring value back. And I feel recycling does exactly that. Just to sort of explain where textile recycling comes from, a lot of people say it's a first world problem, that it's the problem of the West because they use so much. They just, like, I mean, you read all of these statistics on social media, etc., that an average person in America goes through XYZ number of clothes in a year, and they're discarding so many, and only 1% of them are getting recycled, etc. These are all facts and figures that are available everywhere. I'm not going to harp on them because that's not new information that you need to know. But what's also happening is that it's becoming a split where it's just, no, that's a problem of the West. They are the ones who are not, using things well enough. But as long as you're buying fast fashion, you're playing into the same problem, one. Two, all of that textile waste that is coming in from the West is actually being recycled only in countries in the East. India is one of the countries still that is buying textile waste from the West to be able to recycle it, to make new things out of it, and actually then use it in the market or make something of value to send back into the export market. China stopped buying waste from the West anymore. We're still buying. So it becomes a whole world's problem. It's not just one part of the world that is at fault or can be called out for it. It is all of us because we're playing into the same issue. What really happens when textiles are sent to get recycled? It's a really interesting format. So as you can see, there are piles of different colors. So textiles have to actually first be sorted, which currently is being done entirely manually. It's human sorting that is happening. There is not that much that machines have been able to be trained to actually sort out fabric. And when I say garments, when I say sort, what I mean to say is that it's not just color. Color is easy to identify. So put all of the red pieces, like red clothes in one pile and put all the blue. But it's even while you're sorting it to be able to understand materiality. Is this cotton? Does this have the presence of maybe synthetic fibers in it, etc.? If there are zips, if there are buttons, all of those bits need to be removed. If there are hooks, they need to be undone. So pulling away all of the hardware and leaving behind just the textile bits. All of this is done primarily by hand. And it is an industry that is giving employment to quite a few, but it's also really, really high skilled labor, which is not given its due, because these women who are, and they're primarily women who are doing a lot of the sorting, these women are so good, they can touch and understand what's going on. They're not pouring hours over reading a care label to be able to understand. There are problems within that as well, but we'll not go into everything. I'll never finish this session. But so we're looking at manual sorting that happens primarily by color, because what happens with textile recycling is that it's an entirely dry process, which means that the nature of waste produces the nature of yarn. So if you get blue color waste, you will get blue color yarn. There is no dyeing involved in between. It is an entire dry process for most recycling of textiles, most of post-consumer textiles, as we call it. So anything that has had its lifespan fulfilled on a person's body, so it has been consumed by a consumer, post-consumer, becomes post-consumer textile waste. There are many grades of textile waste. There is post-industrial, where while fabric is being made, there's a lot of waste that's generated, whether it's some bits that went bad on the loom while weaving, or some defects have happened, or got ripped or torn, or even just fiber waste or yarn waste while textiles were being made. All of that is called post-industrial waste. Then we have pre-consumer waste, which is when things are at a factory stage, where when, let's say, a big fast fashion brand orders a certain sweatshirt in 1 million quantity. And there are factories in India that are actually producing to that extent, where you produce that many numbers of a single piece. So imagine the mountain of waste that will come out while you're cutting those pieces. So even though it's a simple t-shirt, when you cut the shape of the neck, a little semicircle comes off. Or when you cut this side of an armhole, a little sliver comes off. All of those bits, imagine for 1 million pieces, if they amount up, that's a couple of tons of waste that comes out. All of that is pre-consumer waste. So that is also taken and recycled. So it doesn't require this much of effort, where there's no sorting required to be done on the basis of fabric quality, etc., because most of it comes in batches if it's organized. If it's not, then even that requires a lot of sorting. And once all of this sorting is done, it goes into a space where it can either be upcycled or it can be recycled. Upcycling is where we're taking the same thing and we're just elevating its, how would you say, its role. We're not actually breaking it back down to its original format to reuse it in the entire consumer chain. So I'll make it simple, that we could actually take waste fabric and cut it into shreds, into like patla pattis, and weave those pattis together to make mats like this, which you must have seen dime a dozen. Go to your regular, sort of market, and there are mats that are available like this. These are all recycled mats. They're made by older fabric being shredded into pattis, woven, and we can use them as a floor mat. Therefore, if it's dissected further, if it's not, so this is upcycling of that same, or you can, like a lot of DIYs you might have seen, where you can convert like an old shirt into a skirt or a dress or something. All of that is upcycling, where you're still not changing the nature of something back into raw material. You're just changing its use case. So it's not an old shirt anymore. It's become a rug. It's not a old jacket anymore. It's become a bag or something like that. Recycling is when you create intervention to be able to break things down into raw materiality. So, the other stage after sorting is that it can, all of the cotton waste is then shredded back into fiber stage. Think of it as a large paper shredder. If you've ever seen paper shredding of documents. So think of it as actually shredding fabric completely into a cotton ball. It's different from the cotton that comes out from the fields, but it's still at a raw materiality stage. It's fiber. And now that fiber is mixed with other fiber to be able to spin it into new yarn or dhaga, because then it can form a raw material for a new product to be born. And that dhaga can be then woven into new fabric. So fabric can be recycled to make new fabric. Very little of it is being done right now, but it can be done and is being done. The shirt I'm wearing is made from recycled cotton textiles. So it's 100% cotton. There's a lot of other interventions also that happen where I'll get into some of that in a bit. But all of this format of work is governed by certain standards. So it's not just that you and me can sit at home and shred some bits and call it recycled and yay gung ho sell. It needs a little more intervention so that we can standardize it for industry purposes. Where by that, what I mean to say is that if you are sitting in, I don't know, some other part of this country, and I'm sitting in another part of this country, or we're sitting from different, like we're sitting apart in different countries, we're still talking similar languages in terms of materiality. What you mean by a certain color and account of thread made by a certain format should mean the same thing to me, which is why we need standards. So when I say most thread is understood as a count. It's a lot of technicality, but bear with me. It's just it's the gauge for a thread. So so yarns, whatever that we make fabric out of. So those yarns, to be able to be certified as being pure of that standard, they need to go through certain tests and go through certain stringent requirements so that they are understood at the same level across the world. And some of these standards are like the Global Recycle Standard, GRS. So these are GRS certified yarns. If you ever read something like that, what that means is that these yarns are certified recycled yarns because they have been proven to have gone through the rigorous process that helps them be the standardized format that is required for recycled use as a raw material. Or we have the GOTS certified, which is Global Organic Textiles Standard, which means organic cotton yarn. You must have heard this term a lot, or this is an organic cotton t-shirt, etc. The next time you hear such things, do go up to these websites or to the websites of where you've heard of this product and see if they're talking about these kind of standards and if they're talking about these kind of certifications, because that's the only way to, at this point, state authenticity of any kind of product. I could sell you anything and say organic here, which is also why a lot of people don't believe it. Like I know people who have a tough time believing, yeah, I mean, bolte rahe ho organic aata hai, but what is the proof? Kahan hai proof? Like sab aata ek jaisa hi hota hai, sirf packet mein dal ke isko organic bol dete hain aur zyada paise bhi dete hain. But if you look at all of these kind of standardizations and these kind of certifications, which are only obtained when you do the work, then you know that the product is authentic. So it's important, become an aware consumer, become an aware person who's part of this industry. Go look for these these are just two that I'm pulling out. There are so many. There's fair trade certifications, which mean that people and practices within a certain organization are completely under the standard fair trade practice. There's so many others depending on what kind of materiality. Since we're talking about textile recycling, these are two that really play an important part, because textiles are genuinely a lot of times mixed with organic textiles to create, like we do that. to create the best possible product that we can within within the wholesome 100% natural spectrum. What I was talking earlier about materiality in terms of what else can be introduced. So another thing that's become really popular over the last couple of decades is the idea of recycled polyester, and it's being marketed and is it feels like a great fun thing. It's like dimag ki batti jali. Arey wow, they converted so many PET bottles into dhaga, and I'm wearing a t-shirt made out of that, dude. Like, who's more awesome than I am? And that's the way that it's being sold. And on one level, yeah, like awesome that you were able to do something creative like that or innovative like that. But another level, is it really sensible? So a lot of recycled yarn is currently being made where recycled cotton needs something else to support it. So a lot of recycled polyester is being added to it, and it's being understood as a really robust solution for the future. Where I personally differ with that is that I did that too. When I started off, my first ever foray into recycling was when I saw all of these kind of opportunities. I felt, okay, great, I am in the practice of recycling. But when I understand the larger consequences of it, I'm today at a point where I feel like I'm not sure it's a great idea to convert plastic bottles into thread. There is no need, first of all. Plastic bottles, if at all they need to be recycled, should become plastic bottles again. That's the only way that they are being circular. Otherwise, they're not being circular. Otherwise, they're just creating another linear chain where they are becoming textiles, which then have to have another question mark on isko kaise recycle kare when this reaches end of life. And to be honest, we've not developed that technology, or it's not popular technology yet, that we know how to make recycling possible for garments that are made out of a combination of polyester and cotton at this point. So also the reason why I don't support a lot of this innovation of converting polyester or converting plastic into yarns is because what actually happens when you use polyester is that it creates microplastics, which means that polyester dhaga, every time you wear it and every time you wash it, it sheds micro bits of plastic. Micro bits of polyester dhaga are in the air, are in your water stream every time it's washed, and that's pollution. Where is that going? That's going to pass through, sadly, our washing machines and our waste systems do not have filters for this kind of microplastic pollution. Nobody thought of it. Nobody thinks it's important still. And every time you wash a polyester garment, there is a pretty decent amount of polyester waste that is coming out that goes into your water stream and goes directly into the water bodies, or goes and settles into our soil where this water percolates. And basically what's happening is we're covering the oceans and our waterbeds with a layer of plastic. It's happening. I mean, you've all seen those forwards going around that, we all contain a credit card size plastic amount in our body, etc., etc. Fish have plastic in them. Where is it coming from? It's coming from this. It's coming from our consumption. So if we realize that, then why would I make recycled polyester yarn? I mean, I don't see any good sense in doing that. So it's these kind of things that you have to inform yourselves about within the space of recycling. And these are only things we're going to be able to learn once we do. It's a trial and error, because everyone's making honest effort to innovate, to come up with formats to be more sustainable. But we also have to be open to the idea that, okay, some of our solutions might not be 100% correct. They might not, what's true for today needn't be true for tomorrow. So I might think that, okay, I've cracked it, but it might actually not be a great idea. And I'm open to that. I'm in a constant state of exploration. Even though I say I'm working in sustainable fashion, I don't have all of the solutions. I mean, I might realize that I'm doing something wrong tomorrow. That doesn't mean I'm going to shut shop. It just means that I will try and do better whatever I thought was already good. Moving on. One thing that we can do as individuals, and this is an interesting product that you should look up, is a guppy friend bag. So this is probably the only sure shot thing that is out there that can save you from microplastic pollution that your clothes are causing, is if you actually bought this bag. It's available on Amazon. You can look it up. It's called Guppy Friend. It's right there on the bottom right corner. These are really interesting polyamide bags that if you put your polyester clothes into and you wash them in the washing machine, they would trap all of the microfibers in them and not let them get into the waste stream, which you can then responsibly take out of the bag later. You'll notice it's a very small amount. You might actually think that what you're doing, but trust me that every little bit counts. And you take that out and you responsibly dispose it in your dry waste. And that can be done. So on an individual level, it's these kind of practices, the same as not using a plastic straw. Investing in these kind of formats of consumption so that you become more responsible with everything you're doing. Then, of course, there are other questions that sustainability poses, which is what is the human cost of everything that we make? Is it, I mean, there are human beings who are making this quantum of fashion that we want to consume, and they're being paid wages which are not actually fair. If they were fair, then we wouldn't have to make it across different parts of the world. And do we need to consume that much is a big question. I'm not going to answer these questions. I'm just going to pose these here as a way of wrapping up this session, because that's really where I want all of us to direct our thoughts, our energies into understanding how, I mean, we're all asking this question, what is sustainability, right? All of this is sustainability. Becoming more conscious about every aspect of what you do is sustainability. Becoming aware of who is making your clothes, where are they being made, in a factory in Tamil Nadu, in a factory just 2 blocks away from where you live, or in another country. Is my clothing coming from China? Is it coming from Bangladesh? Is it coming from Italy? Becoming responsible and aware and understanding what the ramifications of that choice are. That it's not one is good or bad. It's about knowing what is good for you, what is good for the community around you, and what is good for the larger environment around you. How soon or how often must I consume clothing that is made from a country where it has to be shipped into me over so many leagues of cargo, which is got its own carbon footprint. When honestly, like in India, we sit with opportunity. Like I could go to a tailor down the road and get something made. If I really needed, something that expressly. So one solution over another, asking yourself those kind of honest questions. Then other kind of questions where is secondhand really sustainable? I'm not opposed to the idea of secondhand. Believe me, I support every thrift shop there is today. And I think it's great that, a lot of young people are choosing to thrift rather than to walk into fast fashion stores. I think it's a good way, because it's actually creating systemic change in fashion, where a lot of brands are beginning to realize value in reselling their own products. And there are lovely initiatives out there. But there's also, like, everything's got a pro and a con. There's also a downside to it, where there's a lot of people who are just thinking that it's a great way to alleviate guilt. So it's still cheap. Secondhand fashion can be much cheaper than some of the more sustainable options out there. And in that sense, you feel like, okay, I mean, mere pocket mein yahi baithta hai, but I'll buy it every day because, you know, such cool stuff. And then if you're still not checking your consumption and you're just finding an alternative to consume the same amount in another manner, then it's a problem. Otherwise, I think secondhand is phenomenal. It's a great idea. It's not the only way that we're going to be able to save this planet, but it's a great way to start because we're thinking. And at last, I think we need to start getting aware. You know, it's important for us to ask these questions, and that's all that sustainability is. So if somebody asks me to explain to a 7-year-old how can you explain what does it mean to be sustainable, I won't say that it's about using organic, using recycled. No, none of those things. It's just about asking more and more, developing a curiosity for everything that you do. Hello? Hello?
Yes, Atif. We can hear you. Yeah,
okay. Great. Okay. So I suppose that's also a lot that I've said, but I'll just end on this note that it's about becoming aware. It's about asking the questions, getting curious. That's all sustainability is about. I don't think just by each of us deciding to wear organic cotton t-shirts, we're going to change the planet. But by each of us deciding to wear organic cotton t-shirts because we've become more aware of what is the impact of an organic cotton t-shirt, and we've become more responsible towards consuming things so that we don't feel like we need 100 organic cotton t-shirts to satisfy our needs. That is true sustainability. A state of existing without the fear of trends, without the fear of market pressure, or without the fear of cost factor, without the fear of what you're doing to the environment. Because I think guilt is the worst format to use to sell things. And I think a lot of sustainability is being sold in the format of guilt. It's like you should feel bad about how many t-shirts you buy, and you should feel bad about buying fast fashion. It's not just that. It's about like get yourself a little more aware now, and then go and buy whatever. So if you think that you're going to wear a fast fashion t-shirt for its entirety and for your entirety, and you will do justice to it, and that's why you're picking it up, by all means, go buy it. I'm not saying that every fast fashion brand needs to shut down tomorrow. No, I'm not opposed to anybody. I don't think we need to be. But I'm trying to bring all of us to a point where we think a little more consciously about what our choices do. And that consciousness is what's going to help us be conscious consumers and therefore be part of a more sustainable setup. I think that is pretty much what I have to say. Thank you. I've got a few questions. I'm going to take these up as I go. So there's Aditi who has asked, what makes a material sustainable? Okay, how I would ask this question is on 3 layers. One is, how does it affect the person who's using it? So the individual. So in that sense, a material is sustainable for me because it works for my body. So I have to ask the question, what works for my body? If I live in a tropical climate like India, cotton works perfectly for my body. It is great for the heat. It is great for the cold even. It is a fiber and a fabric that is most temperature suited for where I live. And then, of course, then you start asking, okay, what else does my body need? My body doesn't need, any harmful dyes. So maybe that's why if it were natural dye, it would be kinder to my body. So you ask such questions to be able to understand how it works for the individual. Then you try and answer how it works for a community, which is beyond that individual. So if it's a community of tailors who are making that garment for you, a community of weavers who are weaving that for you, or a community of farmers that are growing that fiber for you, is it sustainable for them? Is it making sense to them for you to be part of this consumption? And so if there is a fabric that is using a lot of toxic chemicals and huge intervention of chemicals in general to be generated, it's not a great idea for all the people involved who are in the supply chain of making that fabric, because they're being exposed to that, and that's not fair. Or if it's a format of making that material that is unfair. So if people are being forced to make it under pressure and are not being paid fairly to make it, then that material is not sustainable, even if it is the nicest cotton that feels the best on your body. And lastly, and most importantly, is how is it sustainable for my environment? So then you ask the question that, okay, like a lot of people say, cotton is unsustainable because it takes so many resources, so many liters of water. All of that is right, but that is only by comparison. That is done a lot of times to prove comparison of other fibers. So to say that, okay, a certain synthetic fiber is better because it takes lesser resources. Yes, but I wouldn't look at it in that much of an isolation. I'd look at the larger picture. Cotton is actually heavier on the planet only because of the overconsumption of cotton. If we didn't grow cotton in the large quantums that we're growing it today, it would not be that heavy and leaching to our soils. We don't need to grow that much cotton. We're growing that much cotton because we have that much of consumption. If we consumed more responsibly, you bought better cotton and you bought it not 500 times in a year, but only 5 times a year maybe, or even lesser, because you don't need that much. You would grow lesser cotton and therefore you'd grow it responsibly. Because it is actually the kindest to our bodies and to the soil. There are other fibers, don't get me wrong. So, but if I had to put a check on anything for sustainability, this would be my threefold check: the individual, the community, and the environment. I hope that answers your question, Aditi. I've got another question that says, is sustainability going to stay as a fashion trend? Well, that's, in my opinion, I feel sustainability, the word may, because after a point we'll get bored of the word sustainability and we'll want to replace it with some other word, but the thought won't. As long as we are concerned about the future we are creating, as long as we are responsible towards the future we are creating, there will be the need for us to question what is sustainable and what is not. So it's trending right now because we're asking that question in multiples. People have been asking this question for a long time, believe you me. It's not something new. So it's not just a trend that came up. It's just becoming popular and gaining that mass. So I don't think it's a movement that's here to die. It's a movement that's actually going to change the way we all consume. So that's my answer on fashion trend versus sustainability. Okay, I've been asked to share my journey. My journey, it's no different from what I've already said. I started off as I'm trained in fashion. I learned how to make clothes and very quickly got bored of the idea and decided I wanted to make shoes. So I went and trained in that. I came back to India and started making shoes and really enjoying myself. I still absolutely love it as a craft. But I quickly realized that there were some gaping loopholes in the materiality of shoemaking, which involves leather. And because I was running such a small setup with two of my closest friends, and we were doing everything that we thought was sensible and honest. But at the same time, so it worked for us as individuals, and we were supporting a community around us, we were creating beautiful design. But because we were a very small enterprise, we were not able to, in any way or fashion, create from raw materials that were sensible to the earth. We were buying leather that was that used a lot of toxic chemicals to be tanned and treated, and that caused a lot of sort of personal dilemma. It was not okay with me, and I couldn't better that because I didn't have the investment to do so. So I gave it up. I just did. I had to. I thought it was the most responsible thing to do. And then I took a long time to understand what actually, because I felt like there's nothing new to be created. Till I came around to an idea that, okay, if I did contribute in some way, because I have the thought and I feel towards it towards creating solutions of recycling waste, I'd probably feel a little better about what I was doing. So that's how my quest into sustainability, into textile recycling, and now 5 or so years later, I feel like I just about scratched the surface, so I can share some of it with you. I've also got another question that says, how can I depict sustainability in my portfolio? By practicing it. You have to show practice of sustainability. And practice does not mean that I need experience. We're not talking about years of doing something. It's about actually being able to engage with the materiality. So if you are curious about sustainability, then start asking the questions on, and there's so many. I just showed you one small little part of sustainable practice, which was textile recycling. There's so many others. There is innovation, there is conservation. So if you felt like you could contribute anywhere, like I have students who are really curious about materiality. There are students who have been experimenting with what is innovative material that may actually biodegrade, and how to craft that. So whether you're making it from food waste, and would we want to wear something like that? So just that kind of exploration is great. Or even just, trying to figure out what nature does to certain textile, and therefore being able to respond from that point to design. That kind of conversation, if you start having in experiments that you're doing, is brilliant stuff for portfolios. I would love to see students and that is sustainability. Trying to imagine like zero waste design. That's a huge, huge space for anyone who's interested in pattern cutting and in generally making new shapes. Like, can you make new shapes without any fabric wastage? Look at us as the Indian subcontinent. We're the most sustainable textile users of the world. We never cut fabric to begin with. The sari, the dhoti, the veshti, the dupatta, all of the things that we actually use on our bodies are all drapes. They're all made from fabric that comes directly off the looms. It was never cut. So it's those kind of thoughts, like put your mind into thoughts like that, and try and create experimental practices from that. And that is sustainability. I would love to see that in somebody's portfolio. Okay, I think we may just be running out of time, and I think that's all that we may have time for, if I've answered everybody's question. If there's anything else, I'm happy to address it. Otherwise, we can wrap this up.
Hey Atif, it was a great session. Thank you so much for joining us, and we loved to learn about sustainability. We got so many questions from the audience, and since we're running out of time, we request students to hold on to that thought. We will catch up with Atif sir again for many more such sessions.
Okay. Lovely.
Great, Atif. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day ahead.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Happy Sunday.